Hi guys, so today's game was actually suggested by Subhash Bisht and it's between Garry Kasparov and the Fritz computer. And honestly, this one is crazy. Like the way Kasparov attacks in this game, it's just brutal. He completely crushes the engine move by move and you are gonna love how it unfolds. By the way, before we jump into it, tell me in the comments what games you want me to cover next. Alright, let's get into the game. And basically, this game starts with the semi-Slav defense, c6, and after that, e3 by Kasparov, moving towards the main line in semi-Slav defense. And now here black can continue this game by pushing b6, trying to attack this pawn chain, but obviously white cannot capture on b6 due to the threat of bishop takes b4. So that's why let's suppose if he goes for a3, now comes a5, trying to just imbalance the structure. And let's suppose if white decides to push b5, targeting this c6 pawn, but instead of capturing, here black can go for bishop to b7, uh, defending this pawn takes, takes, c takes b6, queen takes b6, and after that bishop to d3, preparing to castle. And black can also go for bishop to d6, and after that both sides can castle, rook to b1, attacking this queen, and simply queen to c7. And at the end, you will see black gets this strong diagonal, which makes this position slightly better for black. Okay, so in this game, after b4, here Fritz goes for a5, which allows Kasparov to push b5, trying to attack this structure, and obviously black cannot capture on b5, so that's why here Fritz decides to push e5. And you can see here black counters the queenside attack by the move e5, trying to take control of the center. And after queen to a4, basically here Kasparov increases the pressure on the c6 pawn. So that's why queen to c7. And now it's better for white to go for b6, which attacks this queen as well as limits the square of the black pieces. But here Kasparov decides to develop this bishop to a3. Basically he's eyeing on this c5 pawn. And after that, e4, a good move which attacks this knight as well as solidifies the central pawn structure. And now you can see this center is locked. And now h3, stopping moves like g4 or maybe bishop to g4 in the future. And after that, black finally castled, and now Kasparov goes for knight to b3, creating some tensions over the queen side. And by seeing this all the stuff, here black decides to go for bishop to d6, which looks an inaccuracy, but in reality this is a quite good move, because if black captured, yeah, basically this is a good move if if white captured on d6. Basically he is banking on a tactical scramble. If Kasparov takes the bishop, then the position will be open up. So let's suppose if white decides to capture on d6, then this will be a mistake because of knight takes b6, and you can see this queen is now trapped. But that's an inaccuracy, because after bishop to d6, Kasparov didn't fall for this cheap trick. He basically brings this rook to b1, and in the next move, knight to a5 is coming, which cannot be defended. And by this you can see this pawn cannot be defended. So here black can continue by bringing this queen into the game, uh, but instead he goes for bishop to e7, and that's an inaccuracy because obviously you are blocking, because you can see here black is blocking his own pawns, or basically this queen is now can't go anywhere due to this bishop, and you can see now there is not any good square left for this queen, and since this a5 pawn is now undefended, so that's why Kasparov instantly captures on a5, knight to b8, opening the d7 square for this queen, and after that bishop to b4, and you can see now white is threatening to capture on c6. So to stop this, queen to d7. Okay, so here Fred's computer goes for knight to d7, and now you can see black is threatening to capture the pawn on b6. So let's suppose if white is not careful, and he goes for any move like g4, but now comes knight takes b6, and let's suppose if this game continues like takes, bishop takes b4, rook takes b4, and finally rook takes a5, and you can see here black successfully neutralized the whole queenside attack of white, and you can see black will be better. So that's why after seeing this all stuff, here after this move, here Kasparov decides to push a3, defending this bishop, and I already showed you the variation in which this bishop is important. As you can see, takes, yeah, so basically after pushing this, you can see now black cannot capture this bishop. Okay, so now knight to b3, and now for black, it's better to start pushing these kingside pawns, trying to create some counterplay, but instead, here Fritz goes for bishop to h4, threatening to capture on e3 because you can see this f2 pawn cannot recapture due to this bishop. But as we all know, that's a cheap trick because white can easily counter this by pushing g3. Okay, so here Kasparov defends this by queen to d2, and again black must consider the move f5 as I told you earlier. Okay, so instead of pushing the kingside pawns, he basically made a mistake by knight to f6, and yes, basically this opens the diagonal of this bishop, but now simply king to d1, a good move by Kasparov, unpinning this f2 pawn, yeah, basically unpinning this pawn, and you can see now this king can go to c2 or maybe on c1, getting out from any threat, as well as uh, maybe white can anytime start pushing these pawns. Okay, so now Kasparov goes for rook c2, and now you can see that the black knights are tragic. They have no outpost square left because as you can see, the e4 pawn blocks the knight on f6, And this b6 pawn blocks the knight on b8, whereas white knights are rock solid. And by all of this, you can see white is doing great. Okay, so for now, here knight to a6 might be the better option for black so that he can target this bishop, but instead he goes for. And here a6, an excellent move. Basically, he sacrificed the a pawn so that he can open the b file. And as you can see, since white is now threatening to capture, so that's why Fritz capture on a6. And you can see now this b pawn is close to promotion. So basically, he goes for knight to a5 so that he can support this pawn. And you can see in the next move, this bishop is going to get trapped. But before that, Kasparov goes for bishop to g2, which is important, defending this rook so that black queen cannot capture it. Capture it when we push h4, so that we can take the bishop, and you know this is this will be defended. And since this bishop is close to getting trapped, so that's why queen to g6, creating an escaping square for this bishop. Okay, so bishop to c3, and basically you can see here Kasparov is improving his pieces millimeter by millimeter, and he basically brings this bishop back so that he can also brings this another rook on b1, which is going to support this b6 pawn. And after that, knight to e8, knight to b4, eyeing on this weak c6 pawn. Okay, so here bishop to f1, increasing pressure over this a6 pawn. So that's why basically queen to e6. Maybe he wants to push these kingside pawns, which he considered which which I considered previously. But as I told you, and you can also see that black got multiple chances of pushing these pawns. And basically, if white is attacking from the queen side, then black also start attacking from the king side, which makes the balance in the game. But as we can see now, it's too late because of the move queen to d1, preparing for queen to a4 so that he can create immense pressure over this c6 pawn. And after that, doing all of this stuff, here Kasparov silently brings this queen back to c2. And basically, he is preparing for rook to b3. And then you can see he's going to double this rook. Okay, so now king to h8. And in this position, the final move by Kasparov is rook to b3. And in this position, Fritz's computer resigned. This is because let's suppose if this game continues like knight to c8, so that he can create some pressure over this b6 pawn. But now comes knight to c7, breaking the connection between the queen and the rook, as well as asking for rook exchange, which he has to accept because of the threat of bishop to a6. So that's why he has no other choice of exchanging the rooks. And you can see in the next move, queen to a8 is coming, which is going to trap this rook. So let's suppose to defend this, if rook to b8, knight to a6, attacking this rook again. And if rook to b7, now white can go for queen to a4, creating pressure over this c6 pawn. And let's suppose if knight to e8, knight to b4, f5, queen takes c6, queen takes c6, and finally knight takes c6. And now you can see bishop to a6 is coming, and you can see this is completely winning for white due to these strong connected pawns. Like this video and I will see you in the next one. This is your host Bison signing off. Bye bye.